Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from YellowCat. Write your favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Let's get started. What dumb coworker's error cost them their job? I manage an auto repair shop. When I interviewed him a few years ago, I came to the conclusion that the mechanic was an idiot who had no idea what he was doing, but the business owner hired the technician despite my objections. The only applicant having an automotive degree, a 2-year degree from UTI, and a letter of recommendation from one of his teachers, he was hired for that reason. Additionally, he had a sizable brand new $20,000 Snap-on toolbox that contained probably another $20,000 worth of brand new sparkling Snap-on tools that appeared to have never been used. Since I don't have time to observe him during his first morning on the job to evaluate his abilities, I issue him a regular, simple ticket that any first-year high school auto shop student can handle. Shouldn't this be no problem for someone with a $30,000 2-year post-secondary UTI degree? New tires are over there, go change the 4 that your car requires. After realizing the car is still in the bay an hour later, I go outside and see the tire-changing machine operator standing there not doing anything. Why is that? I queried. It turned out that he was unable to change a tire. He responded that they had briefly displayed it in his college program once before moving on to more significant topics like race cars when I asked if they had discussed it. After I demonstrated how to change a tire and saw him attempt it, he proceeded to use the machine to take the tire pressure sensor off the wheel, which cost the store $100. I repeated the demonstration on the 3rd tire, and when he repeated it on the 4th, another $100 sensor was destroyed. One of the other guys in the shop was given the task of giving him a practice wheel and ensuring that he understood it. By the afternoon, he was capable of changing a tire on his own. I observed him doing it multiple times. I gave him another set of tires to install the next morning. After a half hour, I went back into the shop because I couldn't hear any noise, and when I did, I saw him looking at the machine again. I forgot how to do this. I did it once more and then turned to leave. Within the following hour, he destroyed 4 additional $100 tire pressure sensors. He also succeeded in breaking the air inflator on the tire machine before the day was up. On the 3rd day, I gave him a new tire to replace and watched him do it. As he was about to break a new sensor, I intervened in time to stop him. The manner I gave this guy tasks to complete was always the same. He ruined nearly everything he touched and was unable to complete even the most straightforward tasks. He kept saying after working on it for a few hours that he couldn't change the belt on the automobile because he couldn't change a serpentine belt. During lunchtime, one of the other technicians stopped by as he was leaving and quickly removed the old belt and replaced the new one. He then placed the old one back on after removing the new one and left through the door. He needed to change a cabin filter but was unable to figure out how to open the glove box lid. With only 2 of the 4 bolts holding the wheel bearing in place, he managed to smash through an $800 steering knuckle on a customer's automobile while attempting to change a wheel bearing. Every time he brought a car in, I had to make the other techs observe him before lifting it up to make sure he wouldn't drop it on his head and commit suicide. He was really knowledgeable about racing cars, but the issue is that we don't work on them. Before the owner would allow me to terminate him, it took me about 2 weeks of everyday torment chasing this guy around and cleaning up his trail of destruction. I have no idea how he obtained the UTI degree. The only thing that comes to mind is that they give it to everyone who attends and pays the fees. He had a job at a nearby GM dealership 2 towns over when I last heard from him. They asked for a reference for a job. All we could say in response was that he had worked here for 2 weeks, and that's all the recruiting manager needed to know about the candidate. Nevertheless, they hired him. I've heard he didn't stay there very long. The bulk chemicals we utilized at the manufacturing facility where I worked included HCl, sulfuric acid, caustic soda, H2O2, and several specialty chemicals for our process. Everything was put into storage tanks outside in a tank farm after being unloaded from chemical trucks. For convenience, all the trucks unloaded at the same location, but depending on the chemical, they would connect to a separate pipe. Each pipe was a little varied diameter that matched the diameter of the unload on the truck in order to prevent the wrong chemical from being unloaded into the wrong tank. This is all common industrial practice. The varying diameter pipes were a layer on top of the extremely clear labeling that indicated what was what. I'm sure you can see where this is going. Instead of purchasing many chemicals from many companies, we switched chemical suppliers and began doing so. A brilliant chemical unloader once decided to believe the firm name on the truck's side rather than his paperwork's accuracy or the pipe's diameter. To make it work, he went to the maintenance warehouse and took a ton of pipe fittings from the free supply. Instead of taking even a minute to ask the truck driver who was still in the cab or to call the shift manager, he spent more than an hour on this. Eventually, 93% sulfuric was discharged into one of our specialized chemicals, which was 85% full, and it overflowed and got exothermic. 2 tanks were destroyed, and a third of the tank farm was damaged. The factory had to be shut down for 3 weeks while temporary tanks were brought in, and the repairs ended up costing $6.5 million. It's incredible that the man kept his job. He was fired right away, but the union claimed he hadn't had enough training and had only been informed of the switch in chemical suppliers through email and shift swap notes. When it was arbitrated, the arbitrator made a decision in his favor. In the end, he received his job back in 10 months' pay. However, he voluntarily quit his job 2 weeks later when the union stewards reportedly told him they didn't want someone so foolish working near them where they might get hurt or worse. To obtain a license, I had to create the technical design and documentation for a crucial function in our business app. I've spent days learning about the legal standards we have to meet in order to create designs that will do so. Our attorney went over my paperwork to make sure I understood it all and informed the board that I made a mistake. He then spent a few days trying to compile a list of my errors so we could correct them. He looked through all the legal documents he produced for me and made the design, which took him longer to complete than it did for me. We lost over $4 million due to the delay. Lawyer emphasized it greatly. I called a meeting with the board to discuss all of my errors, and I was so certain he was mistaken that I could not accept it. I then got into a debate. Our attorney started to lose faith. Because I was persuaded he was mistaken and he insisted I was mistaken, the board lost faith in us. Board then hired outside assistants, big, pricey, in this focused law practice. They reviewed my document and advised the board that it was acceptable to submit as is, while also offering some suggestions for improvement. So I've heeded our attorney in his area of expertise. Additionally, his deeds cost us $4 million. Board promptly replaced him and demanded an audit of all matters he handled prior to that day. What's the smallest/biggest thing you've done to spite the HOA? My grandfather purchased an acre of land and constructed his home from hand-hewn limestone and solid timber. Shortly thereafter, a developer purchased the surrounding land and began constructing homes and established an HOA. He went out of his way to torment them, and I continue his practice to this day. There is a height restriction on trees, so I still have enormous oak and maple trees that have been here since the house was built. Lawns must also be maintained properly, and none of my trees have vegetation growing underneath them. The majority of my yard is composed of soil. I have a gravel driveway, despite the fact that I detest it. Even though I have a garage, I park my vehicle and truck in the yard so as to kill more grass. I leave the garage entrance open for all to see my lawnmowers and other random items. They continue to send me letters reminding me of obligations as well as penalties that I never pay. They began a practice of closing the gate at midnight because I also returned home late in a noisy vehicle, so I drove through it. My trash can has been pushed over and stolen because I leave it on the road. I've had to put up security cameras covering all of my house, and I have pointed a few at the houses of neighbors I don't like just for spite. My family has lived in this home for close to 60 years, and I expect that my children will continue to cause them trouble after I pass away. Not me, but a close family friend. Therefore, they had relocated from a quiet suburb to a new neighborhood that was a bit further from the city and contained a beautiful, recently constructed home. This neighborhood was comprised of a diverse assortment of individuals. However, a sizable proportion of them come from high-paying blue-collar occupations, while others are retired or come from the white-collar world. My family acquaintances move in and begin to learn about certain neighbors who enjoy being a nuisance to everyone. As it turns out, they were also members of the HOA's neighborhood council. Eventually, a few of their neighbors discuss how irritated they all are and suggest that my acquaintance run for a position on the HOA board because there will soon be an opening. He exclaims, "Darn it, let's do it!" Therefore, he runs for the position and wins. Now he keeps quiet because he is only a member and is outnumbered. Several months or years later, I don't recall the exact timeline, he manages to recruit more of his friends and assume key positions within the HOA, such as treasurer and vice president. They have now effectively taken over the HOA and were able to stop the other residents' attempts at stupid nonsense. They still hate the HOA because they don't have total control. There is still some outside company that requires certain things, but they at least have a bit more power and say in certain areas. Just always love it because knowing my friend being in this neighborhood, it was definitely something he would do. Even just to spite the a-holes, if nothing else. No HOA in the UK. Some new projects have management companies, though not as ridiculous as HOA. Sometimes people look after the building. I encountered a fool. As the lone car owner in a flat I rented with friends, I had the assigned parking space. Some guy who looked after the building, he occasionally painted something, but was paid by the building owner, felt my parking spot should be his van's. 2 places were taken by his wife and adolescent daughter's automobiles. I would return home almost every night to discover his enormous vehicle in my parking place, forcing me to transfer it to permit-controlled locations where I had to wake up at 7 a.m. to avoid being ticketed. Yes, even Saturday. I had to take unplanned day trips because I couldn't park if the 2 visitor spots were taken. The landlord never rectified the matter despite my repeated requests. I complained directly to the moron who said the people who lived in my unit before us were fine with it, thus it was an ongoing agreement. He then claimed the area was his or that he chose it as building manager. Self-appointed building manager. One of my flatmates said he was spooky as F. One elevator interaction with him was unsettling. I decided payback was due. I returned home to see his van in my place. I blocked him. A piece of paper could barely fit between my car and his bumper. I went to bed knowing he had to work on Monday. D-head, not today! On my windshield, I wrote my phone number. His 7 a.m. call demanded I move my automobile. I said, "Righto, I'll be right down." Returned to sleep after putting down the phone. Another call 10 minutes later. "I need to get to work. Move your effing car right now." Promise to be right down, no problem, and go back to sleep. I silenced the phone since it was annoying. Door banging at 8 a.m. I'm alone in the flat and won't open that. I'm not clothed. I check my phone. 27 missed calls. Oh goodness, who's that? I pick up. I don't understand the words, but they sound angry. "Relax, I'm having breakfast and we'll go soon. Wait beside the van, I'll descend." After returning to the van, I can see from my window that he's calling his boss to say he'll be late. Choices for breakfast. It took me ages to decide. I decided to shower before breakfast. I heard some more bizarre doors slamming while showering. My shower was great. I think I sang some jazzy songs. After 52 missed calls, I answer and say, "Drying my hair, I'll escape soon." It's noon. Oh, what a great day. A substantial breakfast, clean, washed, and everything. He wasn't there when I went outside to move my car. Quite unusual. I need to shop anyway. Evening arrived. He gave me a rant about how I got him fired, I was a D-head, and he'd destroy my car next time. I simply pointed to the camcorder I had aiming out my window at my parking spot because, bird watching. I also politely asked him not to park in my spot again. He didn't after that. My mother related a wonderful tale of how one of her clients exacted revenge on a tyrant HOA. The man is an extremely successful surgeon. He purchased a piece of property and the HOA immediately started screwing with him, removing his trees, fining him a lot of money for blatant violations, and screwing him even more when he challenged them and demanded evidence. They fined him for the house's paint color, which was already there when he purchased the property, so he paid to have the house painted. The list of reasons why they penalized him continues. The mailbox wasn't the right color, and so on. After some time, this man even stopped visiting the property and moved into another home since he could no longer stand it. He was done because the petty behavior and reprisals had reached an all-time high. The plan of retaliation was that the wealthy and well-known surgeon planned to purchase every accessible piece of real estate in the area. In order to avoid suspicion, he bought property after property in this neighborhood over the course of more than a year. He would name each one after a different business he owned. Even the HOA failed to anticipate it. He attended an HOA meeting when the board members were being re-elected for the upcoming year to air a complaint he had over one of the many letters he had received fining him for yet another absurd violation. He was essentially instructed to pound sand. He replied something along the lines of, I'm dissolving this HOA. Here is a list of all the homes I currently own in this area, making me the majority owner. They were in disbelief, but they had no choice. He overcame them. When my mom told me this story, it really gave me a Justice Lady Bee because of the heinous HOA that we grew up with. Thank you for listening to these stories. If you want to see new videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the like button.